over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over.
One day when Simon was in the land of chalk drawings with the children, he talked about cars. The children didn't know what cars were because they'd never seen any. They thought it'd be fun to have some. So, Simon went home. Went to his blackboard, took his chalk, and drew lots of cars, all shapes and sizes. The next day, when Simon arrived in the land of chalk drawings, he had a nasty surprise. The land was in a terrible mess. Fences were smashed, trees bent, things crushed, and noisy, smoky cars were speeding everywhere. The train driver was by his engine, miserable. Now the children had cars, he had no passengers to carry. Simon tried to reach him. His friend Henry drove up. "Hello, Simon, this is great. Having a car's super fun." And he drove off, zigzagging all over the road. Then more children drove by, and Simon was lucky to escape. The only safe place was a tree. And there, who should he meet but the teacher, who had also climbed up for safety. The teacher was worried. "Simon, your cars are ruining the land of chalk drawings. It's not safe anymore." Simon had to agree. "You must tell the children to give up driving." The teacher rang his school bell loudly, and the children drove up to hear what the teacher had to say. "Your cars are destroying everything. I want you all to give up driving and go back to traveling the way you used to, by train." But the children wouldn't listen. They thought the train was too slow, and anyway, cars were much more fun. They drove off, more fond of cars than ever. Simon and the teacher were disappointed. And as Simon went home by train, watching the cars drive slowly by, he wondered what to do. He saw a big traffic jam, and he had an idea. Simon went straight to his blackboard, and guess what he drew? He drew lots more cars, more than before. But when he went back to the land of chalk drawings, the strangest sight greeted him. Everywhere was one great solid traffic jam. There were now so many cars, not one had room to move. Children soon got fed up just sitting there. They got out to walk, but the roads were all jammed. The only clear track was the railway, so they all went home by train. Soon Simon would go and rub all the cars off his blackboard, and the children were glad. Cars were all right if only you had one. But when everyone else had one too, then cars were no fun at all. And of course the train driver thoroughly agreed.
Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I
One day, Simon visited the museum. He was fascinated by the prehistoric animals. When he came home, he went straight to his blackboard and drew a giant dinosaur. That afternoon in the park, Simon met one of the birds from the land of chalk drawings. "Simon, come quick, there's trouble in the land of chalk drawings." Simon followed, and when he arrived in the land of chalk drawings, he gasped with surprise. The land was deserted. No Henry, no teacher, no people at all. Instead, there were broken trees, smashed hedges, and the railway track was all twisted. Then Simon discovered some giant footprints. They must belong to something enormous. And suddenly, he heard a terrifying roar, and there, charging towards him, was the dinosaur he'd drawn. Simon ran, but the dinosaur ran faster. It opened its great mouth, scooped Simon up, and swallowed him. Simon tumbled down into the dinosaur's stomach. He landed on something soft. "Hey, mind out, I've heard of people dropping in, but this is ridiculous." Simon looked round, and who should he find but his friend Henry, the teacher, the engine driver, even the elephant. Henry was frightened. "We've all been swallowed, Simon, and there's no escape." Simon disagreed. "Oh, yes, there is. I've got an idea. If we all take deep breaths and blow, we'll make such a draft, the dinosaur will catch cold. You know what'll happen then." Well, the others didn't know, but Simon always had good ideas, so they all began to blow. They blew, and they blew, and it got so windy that the dinosaur caught cold. And because he had a cold, he sneezed, and everyone inside the dinosaur shot out as though jet-propelled. Simon glared at the dinosaur. "You should be ashamed of yourself, swallowing everyone like that." The dinosaur sniffed sorrowfully. "I'm so big, you see, I have to eat all I can or I'll starve." Simon understood. And then he had another idea. "Stay there. I'll be right back." At home, Simon took his chalk, and round the outside of the dinosaur on his blackboard, he drew a giant egg and coloured it in. Then he rubbed most of it away until only a tiny egg was left. Then Simon hurried back to his chalk drawing friends. He found them gathered round a small egg where the giant dinosaur had been standing. And the egg broke open. And out popped the dinosaur, much smaller than before. The dinosaur was delighted. "Now I can reach the grass, so I won't be hungry. And I shan't have to chase anyone and gobble them up. Oh, it's a much better arrangement." That's good.
Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over.
Simon had been reading about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and he wished he'd lived in those exciting times. So he drew a knight on his blackboard. Soon afterwards, Simon met his friend Henry from the land of chalk drawings. Henry looked worried. "There's strange goings on in the land of chalk drawings, Simon. You'd better come." So Simon followed Henry, and an amazing sight greeted him. All the chalk drawing people were crowded round a strange figure. It was Simon's knight, and he was addressing the crowd. "So I promise thee, forsooth, I shall slay the fiery dragon and rescue yon maiden in distress." Well, at this, everyone looked around, puzzled. Henry shook his head. "What's he on about, Simon? There's no dragon in the land of chalk drawings, and no maiden in distress either." Well, just then, they heard an engine whistle, and there, chugging along the track, puffing out lots of smoke, was the chalk drawing train. There was a sudden shout from the knight. "Gadzooks, by me halidom and swipe me, if it isn't the dragon breathing fire and smoke. Fear not, my friends, I shall slay him forthwith." And before anyone could explain, the knight charged towards the engine. Oh, my goodness! Simon watched with bated breath as the knight lowered his lance. Faster and faster galloped the knight, and closer came the engine. The two met with an almighty crash that echoed round the land. When the dust cleared, the knight was lying dented beside the track. "Oh!" came a groan from inside the armour. "Oh, by St. George, that's the toughest dragon I've ever met. He's bent me buckler. Oh, oh." Well, the knight was helped onto his horse, and Simon explained what a train was. The knight looked disappointed, but then he brightened up. "'Tis a shame there's no dragon, but I can still rescue maidens in distress." And he galloped off, looking for maidens to rescue. Simon had an idea. "He's such a nice knight, I think we should help him find some maidens in distress." His friends agreed. So all the little girls climbed trees and pretended they couldn't get down. The galloping knight approached, and he was delighted when he saw the first maiden in distress. He helped her down, and then he saw the second maiden, and then the third, and then more and more. Well, before long, the knight was tired out rescuing maidens. He decided he preferred an easier job. So he asked the engine driver. And do you know what job the knight was given? He had to ride in front of the engine and keep the railway track clear. Simon and his chalk drawing friends thought this was a very useful job, and the knight was as happy as could be. "Come along, elephant, out of the way, clear the track." Oh, dear me.
Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you.
was walking in the park one day when he met his chalk drawing friend Henry. "Simon, you've got to come and settle an argument in the land of chalk drawings." Simon agreed to go. As they approached the land of chalk drawings, Simon heard a tremendous noise. He was amazed when he discovered who was making the noise. It was the sun and the cloud who were arguing. Thunder crashed, the lightning flashed, and everyone was alarmed at the trouble the deafening noise was causing. The school was shut because no one could hear the teacher speak. The band couldn't play. The train stopped because the rails were shaking. The knight's armor kept falling off. Well, Simon knew he had to do something quickly. "What's the trouble, Cloud?" The cloud was furious. "I should be raining by rights, Simon, but the sun won't stop shining." Simon turned to the sun. "Why won't you let it rain, sun?" The sun frowned. "Because I would have to disappear, and the land of chalk drawings would get dark." Then Simon had an idea. "Then why don't you rain and shine together?" Well, the sun didn't like this idea, which surprised Simon, because his ideas usually worked. "I would get all wet, wouldn't I? Anyway, who ever heard of rain falling and sun shining without a rainbow?" The teacher nodded. "The sun's right, Simon. You can't have rain and bright sun without a rainbow." Well, this time, Henry had an idea how to shelter the sun and have a rainbow. The chalk drawing people gathered round and listened as Henry explained it. And they all thought it was a good idea. Smiling happily, Simon and Henry walked over to the moon rocket. The chalk drawing people brought lots of cans of paint and put them aboard the rocket. The rocket with its strange cargo took off, and while Simon steered, Henry leaned out and with a paintbrush he painted the first stripe of a rainbow. Simon steered the rocket up over the sun in a huge arc and then back the same way. Backwards and forwards they flew until the rainbow was completed. Now the sun could shine and the cloud could rain at the same time without the sun getting wet, because the sun could shelter under the most beautiful multicolored rainbow the chalk drawing people had ever seen. The land of chalk drawings became normal again, and the rainbow kept everyone dry. The children went back to school. The band played. The train started again. And the knight's armor stayed on. Simon headed for home. As he reached the park, it suddenly came on to rain, and Simon got soaked. Now, wasn't that a very odd thing to happen?
Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you.
Simon's homework was the Pied Piper of Hamelin. He enjoyed reading how the piper charmed the rats and mice, and Simon drew the Pied Piper on his blackboard. Later, Simon met Henry from the land of chalk drawings. "Trouble again, Simon. Mysterious things are happening. We need your help." So Simon went with Henry to the land of chalk drawings. And he had a surprise. There were hardly any chalk drawing people to be seen. The animals and children had all disappeared. And then from the distance, Simon heard the faint sound of music. "Come on, Henry. I must see what's happening." The two hurried off, and soon they could see what was wrong. In the distance, Simon's Pied Piper was skipping and playing his magic flute, and all the children and animals were following. Simon was puzzled. Why is everyone following the Pied Piper? Henry knew the reason. Because the piper was angry when he found there were no rats and mice to charm away, so he's charming the children and animals instead. Simon knew he hadn't much time. The land of chalk drawings was not very big, and the children would soon be led out of it. So Simon called to the soldiers to play their instruments loudly so that the children and animals wouldn't hear the pipe. The soldiers started playing. The soldiers played and played, but they couldn't drown the pipe. But soon, the soldiers themselves dropped their instruments and followed the dancing children. Simon and Henry boarded the train to follow, but the train reached the end of the track, and the piper was still far ahead. Now there were only a few trees before the end of the land of chalk drawings. Simon knew that he had to act at once. "We must think of something quickly, Henry, or they will all have left the land of chalk drawings. What can we do to stop them?" Simon looked round, and he noticed the sun behind a cloud, and he had an idea. "Sun, I need your help. Blow the cloud over the Pied Piper." The sun blew the cloud where Simon wanted it, and down came the rain. Pied Piper didn't want to get wet, so he and the children sheltered under the very last tree in the land. The ducks didn't mind the rain, so they turned and came back. And Simon asked a duck to go and fetch the Pied Piper's magic pipe. And Simon changed the flute into a set of bagpipes. The Pied Piper was upset until Simon promised to draw some mice he could charm away. And the piper was delighted when Simon wrote a solo piece of music for him to play in the soldiers' band on very special occasions.
Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over.
One day, Simon was walking in the land of chalk drawings when he heard a shout. It was the train driver who had a suggestion to put to him. Simon, I think it would be a good idea if the railway track was longer. Then the children would do more travelling by train. Simon agreed. There were too many cars there anyway. All right, I'll try and provide some more railway lines for you to run on. The engine driver was pleased, and Simon went home, very thoughtful. Now, how can I provide more track without having to do all that drawing myself? Simon suddenly had an idea. He went straight to his blackboard and started drawing. Next day, Simon was walking by the fence when he met the train driver. To Simon's surprise, the train driver, without saying anything, grabbed Simon's hand and hauled him off to the land of chalk drawings. When Simon arrived, he saw immediately what the trouble was. There were railway lines everywhere, all over the land of chalk drawings. The lines went in every direction, round and round. Up and down the trees, and the school wall, even over the elephant who'd been asleep. Simon was amazed. I drew a robot to draw the railway lines for me, and I drew a special control box as well. Whatever's gone wrong? The driver shrugged. We'd better investigate then, hadn't we? So the driver and Simon started searching for the robot. They soon found him. He was kneeling, quite still, at the end of a railway line with a piece of chalk. Suddenly, the robot jumped in the air, drew some more tracks, then stopped still again. Then he jumped again, drew some more, and stopped again. Simon looked round anxiously. We'd better find that control box, or the whole land will be covered in railway lines. Everyone helped search. The birds flew off. The dogs sniffed the trail. The children went by train, but ended up on a track that just went round and round and round and round. At last, a bird flew back to Simon. I found the control box. Follow me, everyone. Everyone followed. The bird led them to the duck pond. And there, on the bank, was the control box. And what do you think was happening to it? The ducks were using it as a springboard to dive into the pond. And every time a duck stepped on a control button, the robot drew some more railway lines. Simon rubbed out the control box and promised the ducks a proper springboard. The robot was pleased because now he could be like everyone else. Simon wasn't so pleased. He had to rub out all the railway lines that his robot had drawn.
Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and
Simon had been in bed with measles. On his first day up, he was drawing on his blackboard when the boy next door came in. "Hello, Simon. You're up, I see. What's it like having measles? I haven't had it." Well, Simon, still weak, didn't feel like talking, so he answered by drawing spots all over the blackboard. The boy realized that measles meant being covered in spots. A few days later, Simon met Henry in the land of chalk drawings. Henry didn't look his usual happy self. "I'm covered in spots, Simon, and I'm not the only one. Just look." Simon looked around and gasped with astonishment. Everyone in the land was covered with spots. The elephant was spotted, and the dog, and the cat. There were spotted birds, a spotted train, a spotted dinosaur, a spotted knight and his horse, even the flowers were spotted. Simon was very concerned. "Oh dear, you all look so ill. I must rub those spots out." And Simon took his duster and rubbed out all the ugly spots. When Simon had finished, he called his friends round him. "We'd better find out what caused all these spots before it happens again." They started to search. As they walked past a tree laden with fruit, they had a surprise. The fruit wasn't fruit after all. They were spots, and they suddenly swooped from the tree and flew in formation along all the chalk drawing people, leaving them spotty again. Simon was furious. He and his friends chased after the flying measles with nets. They couldn't manage to catch even one. Then Simon had an idea. "If we can get the spots on board the moon rocket, we could fly up and throw them into outer space. They wouldn't be a nuisance there." Simon and his friends brought out the rocket from its underground base. It was now the only thing left in the land of chalk drawings not covered with spots. Simon and Henry got on board and waited, and sure enough, the flying measles approached and swarmed over the rocket. Simon took off at once, and the rocket zoomed up towards the moon, taking all the spots with it. Up and up went the rocket until it finally reached the moon. And then, suddenly, Simon and Henry switched the controls and the rocket turned round the moon so sharply that all the spots were flung into space. Simon and Henry brought the rocket down to land, very pleased with themselves. When they got out, they looked back to where they'd been. To their surprise, around the moon was a cluster of twinkling new stars. The ugly measles spots had become beautiful after all.
Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over.
Simon was with his friend Henry in the land of chalk drawings when they met the teacher, who looked excited. "Simon, the children have come up with an idea. They want a flag day so that everyone can have flags. I think it might be fun." Simon agreed. "Right, I'll draw lots of coloured flags, enough for everyone." The sergeant of the band overheard this, and he made another suggestion. "Why not have flags for each group and put different designs on instead of just colours?" Simon liked this idea even more. He went home excited at the prospect of a chalk drawing land flag day. That evening, Simon drew lots of flags on his blackboard with different designs on. He drew bananas for the elephant, a water design for the ducks, eggs for the birds, a bone for the dog, fish for the cat, flag after flag, until he'd drawn one for everyone. Next day, Simon met a worried-looking Henry. "Simon, the flag day's all gone wrong. Come and see." So Simon went with Henry to the land of chalk drawings to see what Henry meant. Instead of everyone enjoying themselves and marching happily in a procession, the chalk drawing people were all quarrelling. The elephant was protesting that his flag should be in front of the duck's flag. The ducks disagreed. The sun wasn't having his flag hidden by the cloud's flag, and the cloud wasn't having his behind the sun's. The birds wanted their flag in front of the children's. And these two fought like cat and dog. The band marched everywhere with their flag, playing their loudest so as to be heard over the noise. The train rushed around on the track with its flag, not stopping for any passengers. It was all such chaos that Simon was horrified. He turned to Henry. "I think we'd better get all those flags back if they're going to quarrel over them. Let's wait until everyone's gone to bed." The quarrelling continued all day. They even went to bed, still arguing. When the land was finally quiet, Simon and Henry crept out and collected all the flags. Henry was disappointed. "It seems a shame to destroy these lovely flags, Simon." And then Simon had an idea. He laid all the flags down on the ground in one big oblong shape, and then drew a line round them. Now Simon had one huge flag made up of all the smaller flags. Then Simon drew a flagpole, and he and Henry raised the flag, ready for the chalk drawing people to see in the morning. Now they would have a flag for Flag Day, which would belong to all of them, and there would be no more quarrelling.
Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over.
One day, Simon went to see his friends in the land of chalk drawings. And he found them all training, ready for sports day. He watched the elephant practicing the shot put. Then Simon saw the ducks preparing for the high diving competition. The soldiers marched past, practicing for the walking race. Next, Simon watched the dinosaur, the dog, and some children practicing for the high jump. Then Simon saw the other children training for the running race. Henry was watching them too. Simon had an idea. Henry, I've decided to enter for the running race myself. It's the only event I'm any good at. Henry looked at Simon. Then you'd better get some training in, Simon, because I've entered for that race myself. Simon said nothing, but he walked away worried. Henry was taller than he was, and almost certainly faster. Simon knew he would have to train hard. Next morning, Simon got up very early and prepared for a training run. Simon had not gone very far when he met the dog on the fence. Hello, Simon. You're up early. Why are you running like that? Have you missed your bus? Simon glared at the dog. No, silly. I'm training for the running race. Then I'll train with you. And the dog ran along the fence, making Simon run faster than ever. Fortunately for Simon, the fence came to an end. The dog had to stop, and Simon slowed down gratefully. But a few seconds later, Simon met the cat, who saw at once what Simon was doing. The cat called out, "Good idea, Simon. I'll have a practice run with you." The cat ran beside him, and again, Simon had to run very hard to keep up. Well, just as Simon was becoming exhausted, the fence ended again, and the cat came to a halt. Simon slowed down to a walk, panting for breath. And then, to Simon's dismay, he met 3 of the children. They greeted him happily. "Well done, Simon. We'll help you train for the race. Come on, keep up with us." Simon broke into a run, but he was now so tired he could hardly put one foot in front of the other. A few minutes more and Simon gave up his training and staggered back home. Next day was sports day. The running race was about to begin. All the runners lined up. The teacher held up the gun. Ready, steady. And the runners raced away from the start. At least, all the runners except one. For there, on the ground, was a figure. You can guess who it was. It was Simon, fast asleep from exhaustion.
Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Oh, pictures take me over.
Simon's 2 cousins had come to stay with him. The two girls were both pop music fans. They pestered Simon to draw a pop singer. So Simon went to his blackboard and drew what they wanted. Later that day, Simon was near the fence when he met the sergeant of the Chalk Drawing Land Band. He was very angry. "It's impossible to play band music anymore, Simon. We need help." Simon went to the Land of Chalk Drawings. And he couldn't believe his eyes. All the children were leaping madly up and down in time to pop music coming from a large speaker. The teacher looked annoyed. "All the children are playing truant today, Simon. They prefer to dance." The flowers were upset. "Do something, for goodness sake. We're all being flattened." Simon decided to help. He followed the lead from the box until he came to the end of it. It was plugged into an electric guitar. Playing the guitar was Simon's pop singer. He was singing at the top of his voice. "Peace for the people!" He broke off when he saw Simon. "I'm singing a message of peace to the people of this land, Simon." Simon blinked, but it was peaceful before. The pop singer shrugged. "It's not now." Well, Simon had to agree. "No, that's because you're singing so loudly." The pop singer strummed his guitar. "But if I don't sing loudly, no one will hear me, right?" And he started another song. "What we want, what we gonna get?" The din was louder than ever. "What we want is peace, Lord." It was so loud, even the sun couldn't stand it. He hid behind the cloud. The cloud began to get angry because there was nowhere he could hide. The cloud became angrier and angrier. Finally, he could stand the din no longer, and for the first time in his life, he lost his temper and sent down a bolt of lightning. The lightning struck the huge speaker, which exploded in a puff of smoke. The change was like magic. With no more deafening music, the children had nothing to dance to. They went back to school, which pleased the teacher. It pleased the flowers, too, because they wouldn't be trodden on anymore. The band started to play. The sun came out again, and everything was back to normal. The pop singer tried to sing, but now no one could hear him. Simon went home feeling sorry for him, and he had an idea. He drew a smaller speaker so that when it rained during school playtime, the pop singer could sing and play to the children. And the cloud, who was feeling guilty at destroying the big speaker, made sure it rained at least once a week.
Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Old pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Old pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Old pictures take me over, climb the ladder with you. Well, you know my name is Simon, and the things I draw come true. Old pictures take me over.
One morning, Simon met his friend Henry from the Land of Chalk Drawings. Henry looked excited. Have you been drawing stars or planets lately, Simon? Simon shook his head. Henry beckoned him. Then you'd better come with me. Come on. When Simon arrived in the land of chalk drawings, he found everyone looking up at the sky, past the sun, at a bright, twinkling star. Simon was intrigued. I think we should investigate. So Simon and Henry boarded the space rocket and headed for the mysterious star. Up, up they went, and up again. Soon they could see the twinkling was coming from the center of a strange planet which looked a bit like a fingerprint. They landed near to the twinkling light and got out. The planet seemed flat and deserted, apart from one small, odd-looking figure. Simon suddenly recognized the figure. It's the detective I drew to find the tusk the elephant lost. We found it ourselves, and the detective never arrived in the land of chalk drawings. I'd forgotten all about him. The detective approached. I am glad to see you. I expect you saw the twinkling caused by my magnifying glass. They walked back to the rocket. At least to where the rocket had been. It had completely vanished. The detective examined the ground. Simon, puzzled, turned to Henry. But Henry had vanished. Simon called to the detective. But now he'd vanished too. Only his magnifying glass was left on the ground. Simon picked it up. There was a fingerprint on the glass. The fingerprint dropped to the ground and spoke to him. Follow me, Simon, if you please. Simon followed. It led him to the rocket and Henry and the detective, all surrounded by hundreds of angry fingerprints. The chief fingerprint addressed Simon. We have to steal things, Simon. It's all we can do. We're so bored up here. Fingerprints are supposed to be on things, not just drifting about at a loose end. Simon sympathized. Look, if I draw things for you to be on, can we have our rocket back? The fingerprints agreed. So Simon drew trees and stalks all over the planet. When he'd finished, the fingerprints covered everything, and the planet looked like a fingerprint garden. The detective was delighted. Now I shall stay on the planet so I can inspect the fingerprints every so often to make sure none are missing. Simon and Henry boarded the rocket, waving as they left. We'll come and visit you soon. As they headed back to the land of chalk drawings, they could see the planet twinkling happily as the detective with his glass started his inspection.